Greetings, book blasters, and thank you for joining me for this November roundup. I'm going to be sharing over 35 brilliant books that are publishing this month. And for my first book choice, we're off to the Arctic. So let's crack on and have a look. Okay, so here we go. A Polar Bear in the Snow by Mac Barnett and Sean Harris. This is perfect in its simplicity. The first sentence, there's a polar bear in the snow, is set on a plain white, lightly textured background, which reminds us about the joke, How to Spot a Polar Bear in the Snowstorm. The text continues, still asleep, he lifts his nose to sniff the air. And at that point, we see just the black nose surfacing, the rest of the bear perfectly camouflaged in its surroundings. It's a well-paced story, which makes the most of the turning page to build suspense. Following the polar bear on its journey, it builds up to a brilliant, scary moment, cue squeals of laughter from young readers, and ends up as quietly as it began, with a set of footsteps disappearing into the distance. The pictures are rendered with cut and folded paper, which cleverly use shadow and light to distinguish between white cut shapes on a white background. This is great for shared read alouds, and there's plenty of potential here for using the book as a hook into a polar regions topic, or with older children working on monochromatic collages in white, blue or green as a way of exploring different environments. From cold to hot, from north to south. If you attended the Nikhil and Jay event that I hosted with Chitra Sounder a few weeks ago, you'll be in no doubt about how sweet mangoes are loved in India. As Chitra told us, the best place to eat them is in the bath. The Sweetest Mango is published by Indian publisher Talika Press. Summertime is mango time. It's blazing sun and the sticky mango juice rings in the mouth and drips down the fingers. It's a time that children wait for. But can any mango really be sweeter than friendship? This book won the 2013 South Asian Book Awards. Well, regular book blasters will know that I love an all join in book, and this one will have your class singing along to the tune of the 12 Days of Christmas. Croc addresses the reader. Hey you, what are you looking at? I bet you've come to see me. I'm famous, the biggest croc in the world. And so the gastronomic fun begins. At 1 o'clock, the keepers gave to me a mountain of macaroni. At 2 o'clock, the keepers gave to me 2 cups of tea and a mountain of macaroni. And on we go. And on we go. 3 French fries, 4 pumpkin pies, 5 donut rings, 6 tasty toffees, 7 creamy coffees, 8 mighty milkshakes, 9 cherry cheesecakes, 10 jumbo jellies, 11 lemon lollies, and 12 syrup sundaes. But there's a surprise in the story when Croc is finally offered just one perfect little green pea. And that's the final straw before pop goes Croc. Bright and lively, with opportunities for recognising the time, for talking about healthy eating, and maybe for older children, a fun maths challenge. How many donut rings were eaten altogether? And did Croc eat more jumbo jellies or pumpkin pies? From Mac Barnett and Alice Carson, a gentle story about the nature of love. The story begins, when I was a boy, in the garden out front of the house where we lived, I asked my grandmother, what is love? My grandmother was old, and I thought she would know. She picked me up in her arms and said, I can't answer that. Who can? I asked. If you go out into the world, you might find an answer. The boy sets out on his quest to find the answer to his question, what is love? And he meets many people and animals with different answers. Applause, says the actor. A seed, says the farmer. And the poet has a list so long the boy hasn't the patience to contemplate the answer. Eventually, he returns home, and his grandmother, now older, asks, "Did you answer your question?" The boy, now taller, picks her up in his arms and simply answers yes. There's no need to say more, and it's the restraint here that makes it a powerful, nuanced story. A comforting read, but also a brilliant opportunity for opening up dialogue, perhaps using a statement as a discussion opener. The boy needed to leave home to learn what love is, or the boy wasted time trying to find out what love is. What a delight Malachy Doyle and Andrew Whitston's Molly series is. Molly is an island dweller, and each story addresses different aspects of life on her island. Millie and the Shipwreck is the 5th book, and in this latest book we see Molly's island take centre stage in the global refugee and migration crisis. Molly's school is threatened with closure. There simply aren't enough pupils. The consequences are rather serious for the small island community, as there's only one school on the island. Then, one day, when Molly is out fishing with her dad, they notice a boat in distress. After rescuing the family on board and taking them home, the community rally round to make the refugees welcome. But it's not quite so simple. There are hoops to jump through before the family is allowed to make their home on the island. Malachy lives on a small island off the coast of Donegal, and no doubt the stories are partly inspired by that. If you are looking at islands with your classes, obviously the Molly stories would work well alongside Benji Davies' The Storm Whale or Mari Hedderwick's Katie Morag island stories. Well, I'm really pleased to see another addition to Andrea Beatty and David Roberts' superb questionnaires series. This one is Aaron Slater, illustrator. Following in the footsteps of Iggy, Ada, Rosie and Sophia, Aaron is the latest pupil in Miss Greer's class to showcase his unique talents. It doesn't start well for Aaron though. He struggles with reading and he can't express himself through writing. But he is a talented artist, and when Miss Greer acknowledges and celebrates this, Aaron is transformed from an anxious and withdrawn child into a confident and happy member of the class who's able to bring joy to his community. Although this series features individual children, they are essentially about a supportive community where children learn from each other and help their classmates flourish. The depiction of Aaron's mixed heritage, same-sex parents is full of love. Music and song fill the home, and it's a truly heartwarming image. Take time to linger over David Roberts' illustration. David says that he struggled with reading at school, and notice how the struggles some of the children in the class face are shown in his pictures. Enjoy the cultural references, the celebration of design and fashion, which may not necessarily be picked up by the children, but will perhaps find space in their imagination. So when they encounter these things in life, memories of reading Aaron Slater will be triggered. If reading the book in class with older children, you might want to research African-American artist Aaron Douglas, who inspired Aaron's name. You'll be able to spot some visual references to his art in the book as well. And do listen into the podcast with Andrea and David in the reading corner. I love enigmatic stories that have a strangeness about them, and Frindeswild is one of those stories. With a longer text than most picture books, this works well for readers 7+. It's a wholly original story in the style of an older traditional tale with echoes of stories about snow queens, ice kings and winter walkers. The story starts with Granny telling Cora a wintry tale. Can you feel the tremble in the wind? The sun grows pale and the wild things hide. Frindeswild is coming. In the depth of winter, Granny tries to keep Cora safe, locking the windows and keeping the golden lamp burning brightly in the window. But Granny is caught unawares when she finds an ice child in the snow with eyes exactly like Cora's. Unable to leave the child out in the cold, she brings it into her home and unwittingly invites Frindeswald over the hearth. Cora is entrapped in Frindeswald, and only by contemplating the task set will she earn her freedom and be able to return home. This is a lovely addition to a fairy tale collection or a collection of books about winter, and I think it would work particularly well as a read aloud for lower key stage 2. There are plenty of opportunities here for art and drama to develop a response to the story, and interestingly, it's written by sisters Natalia and Lauren O'Hara. Scissorella is a Cinderella story inspired by the early silhouette animation of German film director Lotte Reiniger. The black and white picture at the bottom of this slide is from the 1923 film Prince Ahmed. It's a remarkable example of early animation which preceded Walt Disney by a decade. This is not a biography as such, although there are elements inspired by Lotte's life. She did make paper puppet shows for her family and friends, and she married her own Prince Carl, who became her creative partner. In this version of the Cinderella story, Lotte doesn't wait for a fairy godmother, realising it's her own talent and ingenuity that will lead to advancement in life. Laura Barrett is the perfect illustrator for this story. You can find her artwork on many book jackets and on these fairy tales at the top, The Snow Queen and the Little Mermaid by Geraldine McCaughrean. There are lots of obvious connections for creative work here with silhouettes and animation, and it would be a brilliant creative response to the study of light. You might also like to read it alongside David and Lynn Roberts' version of Cinderella, which is also inspired by 1920s fashion. Cat problems. This is all about the life in the day of a grumpy cat, and it's filled with dry humour. It's all about the voice of the cat, really. Nothing is good enough for this Moggy. A sunbeam has the audacity to move, disturbing the cat's sleep. A kitten takes its favourite spot and then moves into its second favourite spot and its third favourite spot. The food doesn't arrive on time, and when it does, it's dry food, not wet food. This is lovely for anyone who enjoys observing cat behaviour, or indeed for opening up a conversation about emotional literacy and what you do on those days when you've got the grumps. The book No One Wants to Read by Beth Bacon. What a clever idea this is. A personified book that no one wants to read, but the minute you pick it up, it starts to talk to you and play games. And before you know where you are, you've finished a big chunky read. Reviews of this book are bound to mention what a great choice it is for reluctant readers, but it really is for anybody who would enjoy a laugh. The latest book in Walker's groundbreaking and long-running series, Nature Storybooks, is Catherine Rayner's My Pet Goldfish. It's told from the point of view of a young girl who's excited to own her first pet goldfish, and she names him, what would you name a goldfish? Yeah, of course, she names him Richard. Anyway, through her observation and friendship with her fish enthusiast next door neighbour, she learns more about fish. They sleep with their eyes open because they have no eyelids. They see more colours than humans. They can remember things for up to 5 months. She also learns that as her goldfish grows, it will need more space than the tank in her kitchen. And so she releases it into the pond next door, where she can continue to visit. Catherine Rayner's illustration depicts the young girl's wonder and the watery worlds and the glorious fish colours. It's a perfect introduction to keeping a pet, as well as a first glimpse into the life of fish and their habitats. A good addition to the early years collection, where it can be read with small groups and initiate conversation about looking after and caring for animals. So this picture book biography is the story of Luz Jimenez, who was from a Nahua family in Mexico. The Nahua people are descendants of the Aztecs, and well into the 20th century, they still spoke their native language and followed their traditions. But those in power held that these traditions were a barrier to progress in Mexico and sought to eradicate the language and the culture by enforcing rules of behavior. Luz's story is about her desire to be a teacher and the obstacles to her being able to participate in this profession. However, many artists of the period were inspired by her. Famously, she worked for Diego Rivera and other artists who captured her likeness and her involvement in traditional skills of spinning, weaving, and grinding corn. After working with anthropologists, she was at last able to become that teacher that she dreamt about. I think this book is an interesting addition to the study of Aztecs, Mayans, and other people of Central America, reminding us of their struggles and the struggles that their descendants have had to endure to retain their culture and to benefit from the land and the riches of their land. So on to Michael Rosen's Sticky McStickStick, bit of a tongue twister that. It's a picture book memoir from Michael Rosen in which he gives honest expression to the challenges of recovery from trauma. Sticky is the personified walking stick, instrumental in Michael's learning how to walk after months in a coma and being bedridden. The writing style is pared back to matter-of-fact description, but it's all the more powerful for that, allowing space for readers' responses and for them to insert their own feelings and experiences into the story. There's a profound moment when Michael, finding new mobility and freedom thanks to a wheelchair, looks out of the hospital window and notices a woman watering flowers. It's a simple moment, made more weighty because of the economy of the text. In spite of the subject matter and the plain text, this book is abundant in humour, and here we have to give praise to Tony Ross for his comic depictions of Michael turned into a demon wheelchair user. He almost knocks over a man with a pot on his leg. It's a pure Beano moment. And of course, the anthropomorphism of the walking stick allows for humour too. This is a fable about resilience, grit, and recovery from illness. But it's more than a story about recovery from COVID. There are important life lessons here about getting over trauma and hardship by finding those qualities within ourselves. It's also a love story to the people that help us when we most need them. It should be read and reread, allowing plenty of space for children to respond personally, both silently and in conversation with others. And again, you can hear Michael talking about this with me on the Reading Corner podcast. Faith Ringgold is the latest addition to a collection of artist biographies produced in partnership between Dorling Kindersley and the New York Met. Shauna Jackson and illustrator Andrea Pippins present a lively, colourful account of the preeminent African-American artist. It deals her fortunes from early rejection by private galleries through a growing political awareness and activism. She challenged museums for their underrepresentation of women and artists of colour. It also tells about the evolution of her ideas as she moved towards promoting positive images of women through her storytelling quilts. If you haven't come across her children's book, Tar Beach, there's a video of Faith reading it on YouTube that you might want to have a look at. And for your own delight, I recommend her memoir, We Flew Over the Bridge. The latest edition in Dom Conlon and Anastasia Iselsu's Wild Wanderers explores the wonders of the night sky. Here's a flavour of the text. Star rises in the east to bring out the day, turning the dark sky to gold. Look, here comes a stag, the crowned king of morning. Here comes a jackdaw, clattering a warning. And here comes a fox who's red as day's dawning. We live and we play, we work and we sleep, and the stars at the heart of it all. Dom achieves so much with his compressed language. Here's an example of the kennings that he uses. She's a world burner, planet turner. I think Anastasia Eiselsu's illustration for this book is even more stunning than the previous books. There's so much to pick up in the details that show how the sun has been an inspiration to humans through their artwork, textiles and design. Dom's poetry collection about the moon, This Rock, That Rock, would make a great partner for this and for teachers exploring the Earth in space with their classes. Black and British, this is an illustrated history, and as you would expect if you read the adult or non-illustrated version of this book, this is an exceptional history of Black Britain from Roman times to the present day via the Tudors, Stuarts and Victorians. David Olusoga argues that in learning about Black history, we need to break free from biography and look more analytically at how our present views have been formed by the past. The ugly racist chants that we have heard in recent times at football matches have their roots in the pseudoscience of social Darwinism, and that which was propagated in the 19th century, and the persistent perception that some people hold about the aggression of young Black men also stretches back perhaps to and we know how damaging those views are to the safety and protection that everybody's entitled under the law. And if we look back in history, we can see how that cycle reproduces itself over time, perhaps going back to the sort of views of the uprisings in the Caribbean. They all require us to think more critically and analytically about what's going on. While this approach is less explicit in the illustrated version of the book, it is nevertheless an invitation for adults to enter into dialogue with children, not only about the how and the where, but also the why. There's plenty here that will be new to many young readers, and it's definitely one of those books that you want to see in every school. I strongly recommend reading the adult version for yourselves if you haven't already done so, and having both that and the short essential history alongside the illustrated version in school. And again, another in the Reading Corner podcast for you to listen into. So how will we work together to save our planet? It's up to us, says Christopher Lloyd in his manifesto for averting catastrophe. It brings together 33 artists from around the world to illustrate a straightforward text which makes the point succinctly, with clarity and without lecturing. I think this book has one of the best explanations about carbon emissions that I've read in a book for this age range. It's to the point and relatable and supported by Nick Sharratt's uncluttered diagrammatic representation. Really good choice of illustrator here. It's divided into 4 sections: nature, people, planet, and terra carta. The illustrations provide plenty of scope for discussion. A Sydney Smith picture shows 2 children gazing across glittering water at a power station churning out smoke and steam. What are they thinking? Vanina Sarkov's colourful busy street scene shows different ways in which humans have used the Earth's resources. And then there's another one which depicts what should be an idyllic day out in the country, but it's marred by litter that people have left behind, destroying the experience for others. The History of the World in 100 Animals by Simon Barnes, illustrated by Fran Preston Gannon. There are lots of books out there about animals, and it's true that as far as children are concerned, there can never be enough books about animals. This book is actually adapted from Simon Barnes' adult nonfiction. The premise is to reveal the relationship that the 100 animals featured have had with humans. It's a fascinating read, and one which you can dip in and out of. And the illustrations are colourful and appealing. Nature's treasures. Have you ever wandered along a beach and picked up a mermaid's purse, or found the frail skeleton of a tiny bird? This book is organised around those very treasures that you might discover while out walking in the country or beach combing, though not all of them will be found on your doorstep. Some of them will be found in other parts of the world. It's a book which encourages curiosity, and it combines quality photographs with clearly presented diagrams and labelled images. I really enjoyed it, and I think it's a great book to dip into. I absolutely loved Felicita Sala's Lunch at 10 Pomegranate Street. So I was delighted to see a new book from her, which has a similar premise. As the title indicates, the book follows the year of one community, showing the different produce that they grow and harvest at different times of the year. Some inhabitants have gardens, others grow things on their rooftops or in flower boxes. And each month, a different recipe is written featuring a seasonal crop. I love that they are food that can be enjoyed by the whole family, rather than presenting us with an infantilized approach to food. The recipes are simple to follow, so children and adults can enjoy time together in the kitchen. We're All Different by Tracy Turner and Asa Gilland is a bright, approachable book about individual uniqueness. It covers gender, including non-binary pronouns, families, siblings, adoption, fostering, learning differences and disabilities, physical disabilities, ethnicity, and cultural traditions. The pages are busy with lots to pick up and talk about. There's a lot of text presented through speech bubbles, and I think it's best as a conversation opener with children from around 7 years upwards. You might find it interesting to read alongside another book that I featured last month, You Can, which covers similar ground, but with a different voice and a cast of characters that you can follow through from birth to adulthood. And so we come to a new retelling of the Arthurian legends. This is long overdue. It's quite hard to find good currently published retellings of the Arthur legends. This edition by Kevin Crossley Holland and illustrated by Chris Riddell is well worth waiting for. It's both appealing and authoritative. There's no doubt that Crossley Holland has a deep respect for the medieval romances from which this clutch of stories grew. Stories about a king who lived in the 6th century but are immortalised, embellished and romanticised as legends are. This collection includes some of the best known stories about Arthur and his knights, and Kevin Crossley Holland's text brings the medieval period to life with closely observed details: the sound of the hurdy-gurdy, the merchants selling wine, woad, fur and flax spun into linen. This adds depth to the storytelling, but it's not a history lesson. He gets inside the skin of his characters, showing us their human qualities. Two brothers out for adventure, oblivious to their mother's angst until they return home and face her worry and their father's wrath. The uneasy relationship between Arthur and his son Mordred, the joy and the pain of love and the sting of betrayal. Crossley Holland writes in his introduction, "The glory of Arthur's dream is that it's about human beings, not gods or supermen or superwomen. But that is also a tragedy. These breathtaking, sometimes rollicking, sometimes lyrical, sometimes thought-provoking, and often witty stories are about us." The depiction of men and women and their relationships in heroic legends like this is problematic and deserves closer attention and discussion. Crossley Holland provides what might be read as an ironic commentary through the knight's musings. Okay, so here's one. Strange creatures, said Sir Tristram, weaker than us, but stronger than us. Surely this is an invitation to initiate discussion with older readers. Chris Riddell's illustration brings romance and drama, action and magic with strong visual imagery that will endure. On a personal note, I was especially pleased to see the story of Merlin and Nimue closing the book rather than ending with the death of Arthur. This could be a definitive modern edition of the King Arthur's stories. Stunt Boy, in the meantime, is a brilliant, lively, multimodal book from Jason Reynolds and Raoul III. Portico Reeves, aka Stunt Boy, lives in a castle. Well, actually, it's an apartment block called Skylight Gardens. He loves his community of unique, sometimes eccentric characters. Even Portico's adversary, Herbert Singletary, the worst, may have some redeeming features. Portico suffers from anxiety, the dreaded frets, but when his friends are in trouble, he transforms into Stunt Boy to come to their aid, though it's not always successful. It's a funny and sometimes ironic voice which delivers this story with panache. The text and expressive illustrations draw on television and comic tropes. Oh, and by the way, look out for the cat. Sasha and the Wolf by Anne Jungmann is a reissue of two lovely classically narrated stories for readers from around 7 upwards. Set in Russia, where Sasha lives with his family in a small rural village. The wolves howl at night, and the people of the village believe that the wolves are dangerous. But then Sasha discovers a talking wolf in a wooden shed, and soon boy and wolf cub start to develop a bond and a new understanding. You might want to share this story with excerpts from Catherine Barr and Jenny Desmond's 14 Wolves, which is about a real rewilding project. A debut book now by Iona Rangeley. On a trip to the zoo, the Stewarts are entertained by the penguins, and one penguin in particular seems to be interested in them. As they are leaving, young Arthur Stewart casually tells the penguin, "You, Mr. Penguin, must come and stay with us whenever you like. Penguins are always very welcome at our house." But nobody really expects a penguin to come knocking at the door. It's a lovely debut with gentle family humour, and it's reminiscent of the Paddington Bear stories. Illustrated by Mr. Gum, illustrator David Tasman. The Girl Who Talked to Trees, Natasha Farrant and Lydia Corrie, is a sumptuously produced book. Interlinked stories about what one girl learns from talking to trees throughout time. So these trees are trees set in the parkland of a stately home where Olive lives with her father, who's about to cut the trees down. And so she goes to talk to her best friend, which is a 400-year-old oak tree, and it's in danger from, as I say, her father about to be cutting it down. So the oak tree has its own story, and it directs her to the other trees in the grounds. It's written with a conservation message, and there are facts about tree science interwoven alongside the wonder and the magic. Sisters of the Last Marsh by Lucy Strange. Be sure the first girl marries well, the second in the home to dwell. A third maid can do little harm if set to work upon the farm. 4 and 5 must both be wed, or 6 will bury you stone dead. The curse of 6 daughters looms over Willa, the third daughter, born in a family of sisters that live with their grandmother and cruel father on the farm in the wild marshes. When oldest daughter Grace is married to a man twice her age for the price of a horse, it sets in motion a series of strange events. And when Grace goes missing, Willow will have to confront and overcome the spirit of the marsh, Will-o'-the-Wisp, before they can return home. It's sublime writing from Lucy Strange. This is surely her best book yet. The marsh, inspired by Romney Marsh, is vividly portrayed. There's a depth created by the authentic feel of a connection between landscape, folklore, and superstition. Saving Celeste is a wonderful novella by Timothée de Fombelle, translated from French by Sarah Ardisoni. This environmental fable is narrated by an unnamed, sensitive 14-year-old boy, largely abandoned by his ever so important mother. We quickly learn that he feels out of place in the unhealthy, class-ridden world that the avaricious humans have created. The important mother, too busy to take calls from the Director General, much less her 14-year-old son, looks after him by charging her assistant to keep him supplied with a weekly food shop. This is a car-crushed world where shoppers brandish plastic bags like trophies, a world where smog is sucking the life out of the lungs of its inhabitants, unless they pay a premium for clean air. When a new girl, Celeste, joins the boys' school, he feels instantly connected with her, but she vanishes as suddenly as she arrived. The boy sets out on a quest to find Celeste, and what he discovers horrifies him. Deep down, as I watched the helicopter vanishing, I knew I had entrusted Celeste to a mechanical bird that might not carry her towards a soft, protective nest, but towards the most horrifying viper's lair. Can he save Celeste? Can they save the planet? This is powerfully told, and the boy's sardonic observations of the world around him remind the reader that we are just a step away from this world, and so we're invited to think ourselves about what we can do to save Celeste and the planet. Victoria Williamson's story, Hagstorm, has a distinctly Scottish feel, and it's great to see Scottish history and art celebrated in this way. In 1771, Robert Burns, future national poet and folk hero of Scotland, has big problems. The 12-year-old Rab spends all of his time doing back-breaking work on his family's farm instead of attending school. But when he finds a hagstone, one of those stones with a circle through the middle, everything changes. Looking through its circular hole, he sees the witches gathering in a coming storm, and they have set their sights on his family. Can Rab save himself from the clutches of the witches' coven before the Halloween ceremony in the old kirk? It's filled with mystery and magic. It's got a supernatural twist in it, as I say, based on the life of Robert Burns and one of his most famous poems, Tam O'Shanter. Another debut here. This is a dark Gothic, it's beautifully written, a dark Gothic adventure set in a Bavarian forest with angels and owls and magic. It's a fantastic debut novel from Lucy Hope, full of promise, and I really look forward to seeing what Lucy does next. Chime Seekers by Ross Montgomery step into a world of fairy tricks and hidden danger. Here is, this is a changeling story, and here's just a very short excerpt to whet your appetite. He sprang through the air with a howl of delight, bearing over Ari's cot like a vulture. And then he was gone. The sound of his scream rang off the walls like a struck bell, echoing into silence. Yanni stood frozen to the spot, his heart racing. The man was gone, so was the raven. The room was back to normal, as if he'd never been there, except for one thing. Every piece of glass in the room had cracked When an evil fairy steals Yanni's baby sister and swaps her for a changeling, Yanni is swept into a dangerous race against time to get her back. I love a good changeling story, and Ross Montgomery's writing goes from strength to strength. If you're reading this, you might want to share some other changeling stories with your class. Maurice Sendak's picture book outside over there, and of course the film Labyrinth. Life is not fair, and it's a lesson that some learn at far too young an age. Kai lives with his mum and dad on an estate. His mother is a nurse, his father works as a bouncer, though he is a talented musician. Together, Kai and his father clear an area of scrubland and make a den which becomes a wreck and a haven for Kai and his friends. Here they play and grow together until tragedy befalls Kai's family. And when the adults are dealing with their own grief, there's no one there to catch Kai when he falls. Each of us takes a different path in life, and a wrong turn is easy to take. For some young people, one wrong turn can lead to more devastating consequences than others. It's too easy to pigeonhole young people and to pigeonhole Kai as a troublemaker. And so he's very quickly excluded from school, and from there, things escalate. However, there's a strong group of friends in this story, and they're able to bring him back to himself. This is wonderfully illustrated by Natalie Syrett. It's a book to have and to hold, and I thoroughly recommend it. If you get the opportunity, you might want to listen to the podcast with Sita, Natalie, and also Matty and designer Charlie. So east of the sun and west of the moon, in an iridescent sparkle of frosted light, he appeared, a huge white bear, shifting and shimmering into solid form. So beautiful is Jackie Morris's retelling of this Norwegian fairy story, East of the Sun, West of the Moon. I wish I could read the whole book to you. This Beauty and the Beast type fairy tale is brought up to date. It's set in a world of noise and lights and rotting rubbish, but the bear is elemental and the magic is as old as time itself. There's such a respect for the wildness of folklore and the natural world. This is not a cozy, sanitized tale. It takes us to the dark places in the psyche before bringing us back to the light. This new edition from Unbound is a gorgeous format, great paper quality, space for Jackie's illustrations to breathe, and plenty of white space around the words, allowing them to seep into the soul of the reader as they take time to read deeply before turning the page. And finally, Jessie Burton's retelling of the Medusa myth is a wonderful revisioning for the 21st century. Told from the point of view of Medusa, it centres around what she thinks is a chance encounter with young Perseus, and it's a gradual revelation of the circumstances that have brought her to the island, attended only by her Gorgon sisters. Every day, Perseus comes to the opening of her cave, and they converse, though unable to see each other. As Medusa falls for Perseus, the question is, does he feel the same? Privy to Medusa's thoughts, the reader learns how she's been subjected to the will of jealous and solipsistic gods. The jacket shows Medusa's head, or the jacket, should I say, of the proof shows Medusa, the Gorgon's head that has been severed and is held by Perseus in the constellation in the stars. So the question here is whether Medusa's fate is already written in the stars, or whether she has the freedom of choice and the power to create her own destiny. I love the way that Jessie Burton described the snakes growing from Medusa's head. the different temperaments they have and her naming of them. Each is a facet of her personality. And Olivia Lomenek's work is dramatic, working well for vast stormscapes and the depiction of the powerful gods, as well as the more intimate portrayals of Medusa and Perseus. There's so much to say about this wonderful book, so do listen in if you can to the podcast with Olivia. Well, that's all for November. You can order all of the November books from bestbooksforschools.com from Just Imagine if you would like to. And also just to give you a heads up that the December presentation on the 3rd of December is a Christmas special, and I will be joined by Ross Montgomery. If you join us live rather than watch the recording, then you have an opportunity to win all of the books that are mentioned in the presentation. I hope to see you then. So thank you for joining me. Until next time, goodbye.